Hello, my name is Dr. Susan Blank, and I'm an endocrinologist who works with the Virginia Department of Health. Thank you for joining me for the first nutrition session for the Virginia Healthy Heart Ambassador Blood Pressure Self-Monitoring Program. Today we're going to be talking about dietary approaches to stop hypertension, and hypertension is just a fancy word for high blood pressure. Even though I'm coming to you by video, I'd like to try to make this as interactive as possible, so at several points I'm going to pose some discussion questions and invite you to pause the video. At that point, hopefully you can have a good group discussion and share your ideas and experiences with each other, and then when you're ready, you can resume the video. Okay, let's get started. Today we're going to be discussing DASH, which stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. We're going to start by reviewing some nutrition and blood pressure facts, then move on to discuss what is DASH. Then we're going to go over what a day with DASH might look like, work through some examples where we choose among the healthier of two options, and then finish up by discussing why following DASH works to lower blood pressure and also cardiovascular risk. We're going to start with a couple discussion questions. First, since you've been tracking your blood pressure, what have you noticed about the foods that you eat and how they might be affecting your blood pressure? And second, what do you think are some of the connections between high blood pressure and what we eat? This would be a good time to go ahead and stop the video. You can have a group discussion, and then when you're ready, just come back and resume the video. Welcome back. I hope you're able to have a good discussion and share some of your own thoughts and ideas. And now we're going to move on and discuss the connection between nutrition and blood pressure. The food that we eat can influence our blood pressure in a couple different ways. It can have a direct effect on our blood pressure in the short term, and it can also have an indirect effect on our blood pressure by affecting our weight. What we eat can have a significant direct effect on our blood pressure. Diets that are high in sodium, saturated in trans fats, and added sugars increase blood pressure, but we can also decrease our blood pressure by eating a diet with a variety of vegetables and fruits, whole grains, lean protein, nuts, and seeds. Food can also have an indirect effect on our blood pressure by influencing our weight. The balance between calorie intake and calories burned affects weight. Sometimes we talk about this as calories in versus calories out. So we take in calories in the form of food, and then we burn calories in a few different ways. The first is that we burn some calories just by virtue of being alive. It takes energy to keep our hearts beating and our brains thinking. And then, of course, we can also burn additional calories through physical exercise. And so if we take in more calories than we burn, this leads to weight gain. And on the other hand, if we take in fewer calories than we burn, that can lead to weight loss. And we know that weight can influence blood pressure. Weight gain can lead to increases in blood pressure, and weight loss leads to decreases in blood pressure. Now we're going to take a look at some data from one of the early studies that looked at whether we can improve people's blood pressure by changing what they ate. So this is a study that was done by researchers at the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, and what they did was they took 450 people and they divided them into 3 different categories. Each group got a different diet, and then they monitored their blood pressure for 8 weeks to see what would happen. The first group got what was called the control diet, which was just a typical American diet, and on the graph they're going to be represented in these black squares. The second group got what was called the fruits and vegetables diet, and this was a diet that was high in fruits and vegetables and also included less snacks and sweets than the typical American diet. They're going to be represented by the plus signs. And then the third group got the combination diet. This was rich in fruits and vegetables, but also included some low-fat dairy and reduced saturated fat, total fat, and cholesterol. And they're going to be represented on the graph with the circles. So now let's take a look at the data itself. On the top part of this chart is the systolic blood pressure. That's the top number of the blood pressure, and it represents the pressure against the artery walls when the heart is beating, when it's squeezing. Then the bottom part of the chart looks at the diastolic blood pressure, which is the pressure the artery feels when the heart is relaxed. And then across this axis, you're going to see the weeks of the study. So starting at the baseline before they've changed their diet and going through week 8. And if we look at what happened, we can see that for the people on the control diet, not much really happened. Their blood pressure stayed about the same as it was when they started the study, both for the top number, the systolic and the diastolic. The people who were on the fruits and vegetables diet did a little bit better. So you can see that there was some improvement in their blood pressure, both in the systolic and diastolic, but it was relatively modest. But the third group, the combination group, had a significant response. So you can see very early on, within 2 weeks, there was an improvement in their systolic blood pressure and their diastolic blood pressure, and this was sustained throughout the course of the study. So this was really exciting research. It was really the first time that it was shown that changing diet patterns could improve people's blood pressure. So what is DASH? DASH stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, and it is based on research sponsored by the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. And the backbone of the DASH approach to eating comes from that study that we just looked at, but there have been some modifications over the years based on additional research, with the most important one being the addition of recommendations to restrict sodium intake. We know that this form of eating reduces the risk of developing cardiovascular disease, and it does it in a couple different ways. It lowers high blood pressure, and it also improves blood lipid levels. So lipids are the fats that are found in blood and include things like cholesterol and triglycerides. The DASH approach to eating emphasizes vegetables, fruits, fat-free and low-fat dairy. It also includes whole grains, beans, nuts, seeds, and vegetable oils. The newer recommendations are to limit sodium to no more than 2,300 milligrams per day and under 1,500 milligrams for some people. We're not going to talk that much about sodium restrictions today, but we will be discussing that a lot more in the next nutrition session. The diet approach also limits sweets, sugary beverages, and red meats. Who can benefit from following DASH? The people who can benefit most are those who are at high risk for heart disease. This can be because they have medical conditions like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, and chronic kidney disease, people who are overweight or physically inactive, people who use tobacco products, and people who are in high-risk demographic categories like African Americans and adults over the age of 50. However, we are all getting older every year, and hopefully most of us are going to make it over the age of 50, so I always think that everyone can benefit from the DASH diet because it's really never too early to establish healthy eating habits. What is the DASH eating plan? The DASH eating plan basically asks us to eat more of some types of foods and less of others compared to the typical American diet. On the Eat This category, we have vegetables, fruits, whole grains, fat-free and low-fat dairy, fish, skinless poultry, beans, nuts and seeds, and vegetable oils. And on the Limit This category, it's fatty and processed meats, full-fat dairy, sugar-sweetened beverages, sweets, and sodium, which is basically salt. Now we're going to walk through the different food groups and talk about how many servings of each are recommended per day under DASH. One thing to note is that the recommendations that I'm going to be sharing with you are for an 1,800 to 2,000 calorie a day diet. That's a reasonable number of calories for many adults, but if you're eating more or less calories than that per day, you're going to want to adjust the serving numbers up or down accordingly. The other thing is I personally have a hard time wrapping my head around serving sizes sometimes when they're given in cups and ounces. So what I like to do is use my hand as a frame of reference, and I'm going to show you how I go about doing that as we walk through the different food groups. So let's get started with vegetables. Vegetables are the backbone of the DASH diet. The recommendation is for people to have 4 to 5 servings per day of vegetables. Vegetables are great sources of potassium and magnesium. Those are electrolytes that are important for maintaining a healthy blood pressure and heart rate, and also fiber. And fiber has a whole host of health benefits. It can help us feel full so we don't eat as much. It limits the blood sugar increases that happen after we eat, which is important for lowering the risk of prediabetes and diabetes, and it also is very good for gut health. And as far as serving size recommendations, it would be 1 cup of raw leafy vegetables. So 1 cup is about the size of a closed fist, or half a cup of cut up raw or cooked vegetables, or half a cup of vegetable juice. And if a whole cup is a closed fist, then half a cup is about half of the fist. The recommendation for fruits is 4 to 5 servings a day. Fruits, like vegetables, are great sources of potassium, magnesium, and fiber. And as far as serving size, that would be 1 medium fruit, 1/4 cup of dried unsweetened fruit. 1/4 cup is about the size of the inside of the palm when it's cupped. And 1/2 cup of fresh frozen or canned fruit or fruit juice. If you're going to get canned fruit, it's important that it be packed in juice and not sugary syrup. For grains, the recommendation is to have 6 to 8 servings per day. Grains are also a great source of fiber and magnesium. The key with grains is to choose whole grain products. So as you see on the photo, this would be choosing whole wheat bread instead of white bread and brown rice instead of white rice. And the reason to do that is that the whole wheat products have much more of that healthy fiber that we all need. As far as serving size, it would be 1 slice of bread, 1 ounce of dry cereal, and for reference, an ounce of dry cereal is also the amount of the center of a cupped palm. So most people are probably getting more than 1 serving of grains when they have their cereal in the morning. Also 1/2 cup of cooked rice, pasta, or cereal. The recommendations for dairy are to get 2 to 3 servings per day, and these should be low-fat or no-fat versions of the dairy products. Dairy is a great source of calcium and protein. Calcium, as you probably know, is very important for bone health, but it's also important for heart health and maintaining a healthy blood pressure. And protein is a great source of energy and is also critical for building and repairing tissues. As far as serving size, it would be 1 cup of milk or yogurt or 1.5 ounces of cheese. And for a frame of reference, 1.5 ounces of cheese is around the same size as your index finger. The recommendation for lean meats, fish, poultry, and eggs is to have 6 or fewer servings per day. These are all great sources of protein and magnesium. And as far as serving size, the recommendation would be 1 egg or 1 ounce of cooked meat, fish, or poultry. And this gets a little bit tricky because, just for frame of reference, if you ate a piece of meat or fish that's the size of your palm, that's usually going to fall in the 3 to 4 ounce range. So it's pretty easy to eat more than half of your servings of these products within one meal. For fats and oils, the recommendation is 2 to 3 servings per day. These are good sources of energy and also vitamin E. Vitamin E is a powerful antioxidant that can help protect cells from damage. And the servings here are pretty small. So 1 teaspoon for soft margarine or vegetable oil. 1 teaspoon, for frame of reference, is about the same size as the tip of your finger, so from the final knuckle to the end. And then 1 tablespoon of mayonnaise or 2 tablespoons of salad dressings. And a good frame of reference for tablespoons would be the tip of your thumb, so from the final knuckle of the thumb to the end of the thumb. Now we're going to move on and talk about some types of foods where the recommendations are in per week and not per day. So these are foods that you don't necessarily need to have every single day of the week. The first category like this is nuts, seeds, and legumes. Legumes are things like beans and peas. And the recommendation is to have these 4 to 5 servings per week. These are good sources of energy, magnesium, protein, and fiber. And as far as serving size recommendations, this would be 1/3 cup or 1.5 ounces of unsalted nuts. That's about the same size as the inside of a cupped palm. 2 tablespoons of peanut butter or seeds. 2 tablespoons is about the size of your whole thumb, or 1/2 cup of cooked legumes, including dry beans and peas. The recommendation for sweets and added sugars is to have 5 servings or less per week. So this is really more of a maximum than a recommended amount. The sweets additionally should be low in fat. And as far as serving size, these are also pretty small. So 1 tablespoon of sugar, jam, or jelly. 1 tablespoon, again, a frame of reference for that would be kind of the tip of your thumb. 1/2 cup of sorbet or jello, or 1 cup of lemonade. And this isn't like a big tall glass of lemonade, this is 1 cup of lemonade, which again would be around the same size as your fist. Now that we've reviewed the food group recommendations, we're going to walk through what a day of DASH might look like. For breakfast, you could have 3/4 cup of bran flake cereal with a medium banana and 1 cup of low-fat milk, along with a slice of whole wheat toast with a little bit of margarine and a cup of orange juice. For lunch that day, you could have 3/4 cup of chicken salad on 2 slices of whole wheat bread with a little bit of Dijon mustard, and then a side salad consisting of some cucumber slices, tomato wedges, sunflower seeds, and some Italian dressing, alongside a fruit cocktail that was packed in juice, not sugary syrup. The menu for dinner includes a 3-ounce piece of roast beef with some fat-free beef gravy, alongside some sauteed green beans and a small baked potato with fat-free sour cream and reduced fat cheddar cheese. There's also a small whole wheat roll with a little bit of margarine, an apple, and to drink, a cup of low-fat milk. The daily plan also includes some snacks, including unsalted almonds, raisins, and some fat-free, no sugar added fruit yogurt. So you can see overall this is a well-rounded diet that includes a variety of healthy, delicious foods. Now that you're all experts in DASH, we're going to work through some options where we try to figure out which one of 2 meals is healthier. The way that this is going to work is I'm going to lay out 2 options for each meal and then ask you to pause the video. While you have the video paused, you can discuss and try to figure out which one is healthier and why, and then when you're ready, you can resume the video. Okay, let's get started with breakfast. For breakfast, option number 1 is a 3-egg omelet with spinach, tomatoes, feta cheese, and an English muffin with a cup of orange juice to drink. And option number 2 is a fat-free yogurt with strawberries, blueberries, sliced bananas, oats, and almonds with water to drink. You can pause the video and come back when you're ready. Okay, the winner for breakfast is the fat-free yogurt with strawberries, blueberries, sliced bananas, oats, and almonds with water. This is a great choice. You have the fat-free dairy product, a variety of fruits, the whole grain in the form of the oats, and also the healthy almonds, and water is always a great option to drink. Okay, let's move on to lunch. For lunch, option number 1 is a spinach and whole grain pasta salad with chicken, walnuts, avocado, tomatoes, and reduced fat goat cheese with a cup of water. Option number 2 is a tomato, mozzarella, and basil sandwich on ciabatta bread with water. This would be a good time to pause the video and discuss. I'll see you in a minute. The winner for lunch is the spinach and whole grain pasta salad. This is a great choice. You have the whole grain pasta, you have a bunch of different vegetables in there, the reduced fat goat cheese, the chicken for the protein, and again, water is always a healthy option to drink. Okay, let's move on to dinner. The first choice for dinner is teriyaki beef and vegetable stir fry with white rice and water. And option number 2 is salmon with broccoli and brown rice with a cup of skim milk to drink. Go ahead and pause the video and come back when you're ready. Okay, the winner for dinner is the salmon with broccoli and brown rice with a cup of skim milk. This is a good choice. Salmon is a healthy protein. You've got the broccoli, you've got the whole grain and the brown rice, and then the low-fat dairy product to drink. Okay, so now we're going to take it to the next level. I'm going to ask you to pause the video again. And now what I'd like you to do is to look through the less healthy options and see if you can come up with some ways to adjust them so that they would be more consistent with a DASH approach to eating. Take a few minutes to discuss it and then come back when you're ready. Welcome back. I hope you were able to have a good discussion. Just to share some of the things that I thought about how I might make these a little bit healthier. For breakfast, I might cut back on the number of eggs and only have a 1 or 2 egg omelet. And then switch out the feta cheese for a low-fat or no-fat version. Swap out the English muffin for a whole wheat English muffin. And then for lunch, for that tomato, mozzarella, and basil sandwich, switch out the regular fat mozzarella for a low-fat version of mozzarella, and then swap out the ciabatta bread for some kind of whole wheat bread. It would also be nice here to have more servings of fruits and vegetables on the plate, so I might add a side salad or a piece of fruit to go with that meal. And then for dinner, it's something that we haven't talked about much yet. We'll talk about it more in our next session, but jarred grocery store sauces like teriyaki sauce often have a lot of salt and added sugars in them. So I might swap that out to a homemade version, or if I was buying it at the store, a low salt version. And then I would swap out the white rice for brown rice. Why does following DASH work? It promotes a wholesome and healthy lifestyle. It includes well-balanced meals and follows the dietary guidelines for Americans. It helps to regulate and reduce blood pressure, and it does this in a couple of different ways. It increases things like potassium, calcium, magnesium, fiber, and protein that tend to reduce blood pressure, and also reduces things like sodium, added sugars, and saturated and trans fats that tend to raise blood pressure. And it also promotes healthy weight loss, if that is something that you need, or weight maintenance if you're already at a healthy weight. And it does this by replacing empty calorie foods with healthy, nutrient-dense foods. Now that we've gone over the details of the DASH diet and how it can help lower blood pressure and cardiovascular risk, I think it's a good time to have some group discussion about ways to incorporate DASH into your daily life, some obstacles that you might face, and some ideas about how to potentially overcome those obstacles. So here are some topics for discussion. After having discussed DASH, think about what you have eaten today. What foods have you eaten today that would be DASH friendly? And how could you potentially make your other food choices more similar to the DASH approach to eating? Think about the kinds of DASH foods that you can purchase at the grocery store or at a restaurant or convenience store. What are some of the foods that you might be tempted to buy and why? Are they DASH friendly? Are there alternatives that might be more DASH friendly? What kinds of foods can you buy on a budget that would contribute to a DASH approach to eating? And finally, when you have a busy day and are constantly on the go, what kinds of foods do you tend to eat? How are they prepared? How might food preparation come into play when following DASH? Please go ahead and pause the video now and come back after you've had a chance to discuss. Welcome back. I hope you had a great discussion. Now we're going to move on and finish the last few slides. I wanted to share some of my own tips for success following DASH. The first is to feel free to make changes gradually. The goal here is really progress, not perfection. So maybe commit to making 1 or 2 healthy changes at first. And then once you have those fully integrated into your life, you can go on to add other changes. And there's some easy ways to get started. One is to make healthy swaps. So switch to whole grain products like whole wheat bread and brown rice. Switch to low-fat or fat-free dairy products instead of the full-fat versions, and try to eat fish or poultry in place of red meat a few times a week, or maybe even try some fully vegetarian meals. Another good place to start is by adding additional servings of fruits and vegetables to your day. You can choose fruits and vegetables for snacks, so maybe have an apple or banana, some celery or carrot sticks. You can also add vegetables to meals that you're already eating. So if you're going to have a sandwich, you can put some lettuce and tomato on it, or you can throw in some extra vegetables to soups and casseroles and pasta dishes. One rule of thumb that I like to follow is that I try to fill half of my plate with fruits and vegetables at every meal. This is just a good, simple, visual way to check and make sure that I'm on track with my fruit and vegetable intake each day. Also, it's important to look for budget-friendly options so that this is sustainable. Everyone is worried about grocery prices these days, and people are especially concerned a lot of times about their ability to follow a diet that's so heavy in fruits and vegetables, but there are some budget-friendly ways to do it. When you're buying fresh fruits and vegetables, you want to look for things that are in season. That is usually when they're cheapest and also tastiest. But it's always fine to buy frozen and canned versions. They're usually considerably cheaper and they also last a lot longer, so you don't have to worry as much about food waste. There are a couple things that you need to look out for though. When you're buying frozen versions, especially of vegetables, you want to make sure that you're getting ones that only have the vegetable in them, not any additional sauce. And then when you're buying canned versions, if you're buying fruit, you want to look for ones that are packed in 100% fruit juice and not sugary syrup. And if you are buying vegetables, you want to look for low sodium or no sodium versions. But if you end up getting ones that have some sodium in them, you want to try to rinse them off. You can just throw them in a colander and run some water over them, and that will get rid of a lot of the sodium content that's added when they're canned. Beans, which can either be canned or dried, and lentils can also be great and inexpensive sources of protein. And lastly, I've included the DASH Eating Plan website from the NIH for anybody who might be interested in checking out additional resources. This session was focused primarily on nutrition and blood pressure, but I did want to take one quick minute at the end to talk a little bit about physical activity and blood pressure management. Physical activity can also play an important role in blood pressure management. Evidence has shown that regular physical activity can lead to a significant reduction in blood pressure and improve other cardiovascular risks. It can also have other benefits, including improving mood and energy and even sleep. Moderate physical activity has also been proven to decrease blood pressure in hypertensive patients who are less responsive to medical treatment, so it can be a great additional tool to have in the toolkit to lower high blood pressure. And the goal here is to try to achieve 30 minutes of physical activity most days of the week that's equivalent to brisk walking. So it doesn't have to be brisk walking. It can be any kind of activity that you enjoy that gets you moving and gets your heart pumping. And again, just like with nutrition, the goal here is progress, not perfection. Any activity is better than no activity. So start by gradually increasing your activity and build up to this goal of 30 minutes most days of the week. This concludes today's session. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope you've learned some valuable information that you can take home with you and think about over the next few weeks as you make food choices. I look forward to seeing you at the next session, which will focus on how to lower sodium intake. In the meantime, keep up the great work checking and tracking your blood pressure. Thank you.